Sesquicentennial, Kyle. 150th episode. Look at us go. Actually, kind of look at me go. You've been slacking, but I get it. You're an unpaid intern. One of these days, Kyle, I'd love to know what motivates you to show up at all. Check that. I already know what it is. It's about being a part of something. Something amazing, something incredible, something fantastic, something different. Kyle, my goodness. DarbyCast, Wildcard Friday. Here you are on episode 150. And if you're new, get out. Get out of here. Unless you get the strong sense that this is your speed. Or that it could be your speed. Because if this is episode number 1 for you, you're probably going to be treading water out at sea in some kind of capacity. Every single listener remembers their first episode. And they probably had a weird day. They had to look at themselves in the mirror and say, what the fuck just happened to me? And why do I feel so damn good inside? That seems to be a common reaction to the DarbyCast. And I can't blame anybody for feeling that way. I really can't. But I want to tell you a story today. And I don't always dip into personal stories. I like keeping my personal reality at arm's distance, instead indexing heavily on fiction and made-up scenarios that are truer than anything anybody's ever really heard before, aside from the Bible, the Word of God. What a great tool for understanding things. The Word. Good job. God. But I want to tell you a story about how I almost had to beat the shit out of a homeless guy. Now that caused many of you to recoil and say, no. While others said, what a hero. And there's a third group who haven't passed judgment on any of this yet. And they're saying to themselves, I want to see what the motive was. I want to hear about the facts before I arrive at a conclusion. And don't we all appreciate that stance, right? Innocent until proven excellent is maybe going to be the title of this episode. Why not? So let's set the stage. It's early morning on a Tuesday, and I'm out walking Kyle's former dog, the one that I annexed because he was a terrible dog owner. Kyle, I like that you don't argue with me on that point because you have the humility to admit that you were a piece of trash as it relates to dog ownership. You can't improve unless you know where you're at first. You got to self-assess. Good job, Kyle. But it was Tuesday morning. It was at 5 a.m. I'm an early riser. It's typically 4:30 to 5 is my waking whodunit. No alarm clock, just wake up to the rhythm of my spirit. Happens to be 4:30 or 5 every morning. But I take the dog out, and it's still dark. She's having a blast, palling around, trying to murder rabbits. And we like that. That's sporting. But as we're walking on this pathway, my dog's hackles. It's the hair on her back. It bristles, shoots up. She's pissed in a huge way. She caught a whiff of something and then followed her nose to a place where she could use her eyes. And what did she discover? That's right, a homeless guy who was sleeping in a non-sleeping area. And let's take a time out. Homelessness, rough. But do it somewhere else, right? I've maybe said this before on the podcast, but I'm more than happy to say it again. I think we should take all of the homeless in the United States and ship them up to Canada. And then Justin Trudeau, he might tickle their pickles. And why do I say tickle their pickles? Because there aren't a lot of homeless women, if we're being frank with one another. Homelessness tends to affect men in a disproportionate way. Chicks can issue a BJ and keep themselves off the street. Whereas most dudes are not able to do that. And that's fine. But let's ship them to Canada. Justin Trudeau will be more than happy to suck off some sweaty homeless ween and bring these people into his reality. Justin Trudeau puts on an Indian headdress, does a rain dance around a campfire, goes, hey-ya, 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 and then he just starts blowing homeless people. What a hero, right? Doing his dad proud. Fidel Castro. Look that up. Do a side-by-side of their faces, and then also know that his mom traveled to Cuba and was seen in photos with Fidel. You telling me that homeless BJ Factory head of state is not related to an early adopter, a first mover of communism? You're out of your mind. You really are. Homelessness isn't okay. But the factors that are leading to it, broken families, drug use, people losing their minds as a direct result of technology, just crossing people's wires. And then they find themselves getting a suck J from Justin Trudeau. Modern day tragedy is what I just described. Unless you're Justin Trudeau, in which case you're stoked. But back to that situation with my dog. She smelled stale pee and potentially poo. And then hackles shot up. She's pissed. And then she realized there was a homeless fella taking a nap in a sleeping bag with like an air mattress. Pretty okay setup, I guess, relative to other homeless people I've seen, not relative to people who have homes and or simply live indoors. People who rent, Kyle. But my dog starts barking loudly. And she's ready to kill this dude. Just in case. Some of you are asking, in case of what? In case of something, right? But this heavy-set homeless dude wakes up. And what a confusing whodunit that is, right? How are you homeless and chubby? That doesn't seem right to me. That just gives me a thinking whodunit. Fat homeless guy. I wasn't ready for that. And we should never accept anything like that. If you ever see a fat homeless guy, you go straight out to him and be like, I'm blowing your cover wide open. Get a job. If times aren't so tough that you're thin and you're missing meals, you can very well get a job or go up to Canada. One of the two. But my dog was ready to murder this guy. And we have to respect that. What's the point of having a dog if your dog couldn't puncture somebody's jugular as a precautionary move? Makes no sense to me to have a dog that can't do that. And let me tell you something pretty cool. My dog doesn't bark at anyone, really. But she sensed that this guy may have been possessed by a demon. Because I'm a follower of JC, and I give my dog spiritual coaching and say, watch out for demons. Lo and behold, demon-possessed, fat homeless guy, full of gluttony and inappropriateness. Some people are hearing this and they're saying, don't be mean to the homeless. He's being mean to people, and you're just not hearing about it. What about that? Bet you didn't consider that. You haven't probably seen this guy mouthing off, yelling at toddlers at sunset. Well, guess what? I have. This dude was not a stranger to me. I had seen him before. And so I was on high alert. I called my dog off of the chase, the pursuit, the hunt. I said, leave him be, pup. he's not worth it. And she gave me a look, and we could debate this all day, but I think she winked at me. I have a smart dog. She's great. She gets me. And I get her. Kyle, maybe one day you'll grow up, learn how to have a real bond with a dog, okay? But let's fast forward, because this happened on a Tuesday. 2 days later, you guessed it, it's Thursday. And I'm coming back from another early morning dog walk. And what do I see? I see 2 police cruisers hauling ass going down my street. No sirens, no lights, all justice. They're doing something that's like kind of stealthy, and I don't mind that. The cops pull into my neighborhood, and I look at my dog and I say, it's time to check this out, okay, pal? She gives me a knowing look and possibly a wink. Jury's still out on that. But as we approach this really nice path by my place, I turn to my dog and I say, protection mode, which isn't like a command that I've ever taught her, but we have such a strong working relationship that I think she pretty much got it. She came in close and assumed the role of a canine combat hero. So fearless. All of a sudden, I hear somebody hawking loogies, just and spitting on the ground in my neighborhood. Who is it? You guessed it. That low ethics, chubby homeless guy who was mean-mugging toddlers all week at sunset, murmuring under his breath, I'll beat your ass, small fry. We don't like that one bit. No, we don't. As this guy comes into view, I realize that I have to make some kind of overture towards him, not because I care how he's doing, but because I need to do a quick sanity check on him to see the threat level of the situation. So I say, hey, buddy, how are you? And he gives me this death stare as we're crossing paths, close proximity to one another. My dog's in protection mode, and she is ready to pounce if I say, enact justice. A command also that I've never taught her, but I feel like she would understand if I called it out. Not bad, right? But this guy, he's mean mugging me. He makes fighting eye contact, and we all know what that looks like. And what an idiot, right? Because he didn't realize that I have some fighting eyes as well that I reserve for very rare occasions. And then quite quickly, he realized that he had only brought a knife to what was now a nuke fight. And he cowered in fear. And mind you, this guy is like 6'3", 260. And he basically shit his pants on this spot. I'm a big guy, but one of the biggest parts of me is non-physical. It's my spirit, and it's my commitment to excellence. But I gave him this look, this counteroffensive, what some might call defense. This look said to him, if you try anything malicious, like physical violence, it will be met with rage and violence, the likes of which you never thought possible before 6 a.m. And he cowered away in fear. He was the aggressor with his eyes and his loogie hawking. Don't fucking do that in my neighborhood. Listen, you've fallen on hard times, but that doesn't mean that you get to wander around a neighborhood hawking loogies and thinking about beating the shit out of kids under 5. You don't get to do that. All my neighbors and I would gladly pay for this guy to go up to Canada. Just going to throw that out there. But he left. And then I went and I found the officers of the law and I said, were you looking for that menace? And they said, we were. I said, you went that way. And then what did they say? well, he's out of the neighborhood now. I don't think we have reason to pursue him. And I said, what the fuck are you talking about? I will have you know that this dude is not okay. I saw him having a conversation with a bush the other day, and then he pivoted and mean-mugged a 7-year-old. And they said, oh, well, there's nothing we can do about it. But that had me on edge for the rest of the day, the rest of the Thursday. I chatted with one of my mentors later that day. I said, am I a bad guy for stepping up in a huge way, rising to the occasion to protect my neighborhood from this malevolent fiend? And he said, well, there's multiple ways of looking at it. And I said, that's the only explanation I need. I'm in the clear. My mentor is a big follower of JC, and I defer spiritual questions to him when I conduct myself in a way that I feel is not necessarily JC adjacent. But he and we had a thoughtful conversation. I said, isn't it fair to protect the things that I love, like my neighbors? And he said, well, yeah, it is. I said, is it a bad call for me to want the youth who are enjoying the park across from the house? Bad call that they feel safe? He said, no, not really. Some total coward was eavesdropping on this conversation. And he was like, well, you got to consider what this homeless guy's story is. And I shot him a sharp glance, one that quietly, but not so quietly, communicated, hey, fuck you, you're not a part of this conversation, and you're wasting everybody's time. But he got his comment in. He said, you got to think about this guy's story. And I say to the dude, I say, when would I have done that? When he gives me the death stare, do I smile at him and say, let me take you out for breakfast? I know you want to hurt me physically, but what's your story? Unfortunately, I don't think that's going to happen. This guy was not my neighbor. He was not my peer. He was an outsider, and a dangerous one at that. I gave a 1,000-mile stare to this coward who had weaseled his way into this conversation without either my or my mentor's consent. And I said, here's a scenario for you, idiot. And he was startled by that because he's not used to people not respecting the things that he has to say, even though he's spouting off nonsense. And it's like, listen, your time was going to come eventually when you would go toe to toe and say some stupid crap to somebody who's maybe thought about things a little bit longer than you have and in greater detail. And so today was this guy's day. And I said, hey, pal, let me give you a for instance. Same exact scenario. You've been eavesdropping on the entire conversation like a total creep, so you're already up to speed. But let's say you're with your wife and your children. You do have kids, don't you? He's like, yeah, I have 2 kids. I'm like, it's a shame they've got such a pussy of a dad. But if you're with your wife and your 2 kids and you're in the same situation, what do? Do you step up and protect them? Or do you try to pull a Trudeau and blow this guy into oblivion? Not blow him away with a gun, but blow him away with a BJ. What do? Do you let the guy kick your ass in front of your wife and kids as you apologize to him and say, I'm so sorry for your story. So sorry you've had such a rough go of it. This guy's done kicking your ass, and then he starts kicking your wife's ass, looking over at your children and saying, you guys are next. How neutered are some dudes? It's unbelievable, is it not, Kyle? Like if a situation happened where there was an imminent threat of physical violence, that they would just lay down and take it, and that they somehow believe that that is the morally correct option? Unreal. And don't get me wrong, okay? We got to have a little bit of compassion for the homeless. But it's not a uniform group. You don't have to just like be rah, I love all homeless people. There's some homeless people that I don't really like. And I'm like, I am not okay with you being around here. This guy was one of those guys. Does that make me a bad dude? Perhaps. However, I would rather be a little bit on the bad dude side than to get my ass kicked and be in big trouble. But what I had said to this coward really opened his eyes, and he had this like aha moment where he's like, wait a second, being a good person doesn't mean laying down and allowing people to violate you and your rights and the rights of those around you? Wait, it's different than that? This dude was in his mid-40s and he had this like really huge aha moment. And I was like, how have you gotten through life? How are you this old? And you've just come to realize that in a situation where you or somebody that you care about might be on the receiving end of some damage, the business end of some damage, that you might have to rise to the occasion and play a little defense? This coward, he thought it was appropriate to ask me a question, even though it was like, no, dude, you're done. Get out of here. But he was like, did you go looking for a fight? And I'm like, were you not listening this whole time? I was walking my dog, enjoying the day, and then somebody thought it was okay to hawk loogies all over a path and then give me a fight-initiating stare and not respond to me when I said hello to him. The order of those things is kind of all over the place. However, if you're listening to this and you find yourself in a similar situation or one that rhymes with it, maybe you step up, puff up your chest, and say, don't fuck with me. You give a counter look that is backed with a promise of force. This guy may have stared down many a person before. This homeless fellow, this fat homeless guy, he may have stared down many a person before. And then those people cowered away in fear. And so his attitude and his ego got bigger, this homeless fella. Until when? Until me. Putting on a masterclass and saying, not only am I going to call your bluff, but I'm going to raise you. I'm all in, and I've got pocket cowboys. Where's that been in our society? Huh? I'm not saying go out looking for fights, but if somebody's coming to your neighborhood that doesn't fucking belong there, who's looking for a fight, you call their bluff. You say, I'm all in. You might have a tragic story, fella, but my story is more important to me than your story is to me. And that's just the nature of all things. Some people are hearing this and they're saying, that's not a very JC kind of move. And I can't disagree with you. I don't think JC's puffing up his chest after lifting weights for years in anticipation of having to rise to a challenge like that. Listen, Jesus had the best operating system of anybody who's ever lived. I don't have that operating system. However, I think my OS, the old DarbyCast OS, quite a bit more advanced than the cuck McGuck eavesdropper who was saying, you should have sucked his nipples or something. He didn't say that, but he was thinking it. He wants to molest homeless people's nipples with his mouth. I just got that sense about him. What's the major message in this episode? Stand up for what you love. Defending the things, and more importantly, the people that you love is important. It's important to have values and to be willing to defend those values, those people, your area, your neighborhood. It's important to be able to defend those things effectively. So eat some scrambled eggs today. Go to the gym in no specific order. And then maybe you contemplate this a little bit and say, would I have had the balls or the ovaries, if you're a lady listening to this, to sink that homeless guy's battleship had he fired on me? Think about that today. Okay, Kyle? You think about that. But that's episode 150, DarbyCast, Wildcard Friday, BigWhoDoneIt.com.